Welcome back to Smile and Scars, the place where real lessons are wrapped in powerful stories. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe because today's story is something you will remember for a long time. It starts quietly in a small diner on the edge of town, where a waitress was just trying to get through her shift. But everything changed the moment an arrogant teenager decided to make her life miserable. What he didn't know was that Steven Seagal was sitting a few tables away. And when Steven stood up, the entire diner froze. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind that made people search for warmth and something hot to eat. Inside Molly's diner, the smell of fresh coffee and sizzling hash browns filled the air. Place wasn't fancy, but it had a warm charm, wooden booths, neon signs from the early 90s, and a jukebox that still worked if you hit it twice on the side. Employees loved it, customers respected it, but not today because trouble had just walked in. A group of teenagers burst through the entrance, loud, laughing, careless. At the center of them was Brandon, a 17-year-old who believed the world owed him everything just because his father had money. His friends followed him like they were his personal audience. They strutted past customers like they owned the place and slammed into a booth without waiting for anyone to guide them. At the counter, Lily, a 24-year-old waitress, took a deep breath. She had seen these boys before. Brandon often came in to mock employees, argue about prices, or create drama for entertainment. Lily needed this job. She was supporting her younger brother who had health issues and every cent mattered. She whispered to herself, "Just stay calm, take their order and walk away." Across the diner, quietly eating scrambled eggs and reading a folded newspaper, sat Steven Seagal. He wore a simple black jacket, glasses, and looked like just another traveler who wanted a peaceful meal. Though people occasionally glanced at him, no one approached. Something about his energy demanded respect. Lily walked over to the teens. "Hi, what can I get for you today?" Brandon leaned back, eyes full of arrogance. "First, you can smile. Isn't that your job? Or is customer service too hard for you?" His friends laughed, loud enough for the whole diner to hear. Lily forced a small, polite smile. "All right, what would you like to order?" Brandon picked up the menu and threw it back on the table. "I don't know. Why don't you choose for me? You look like you eat a lot." Lily froze. His friends burst into wild laughter. Several customers looked over with disapproval, but no one intervened. People rarely stood up to teenagers who acted out. They were afraid of drama, complaints, or parents who defended their kids no matter what. Lily held the menu tightly. "I'll give you a few minutes." She turned to walk away, but Brandon wasn't finished. "Hey, we didn't say you could leave. Come back." She stopped. Her hands trembled. Steven lifted his eyes slightly from his paper, watching quietly. Brandon smirked. "Where's the manager? I want someone better to serve us. Someone who doesn't look stressed and broke." Lily bit her lip until it hurt. She didn't want to cry in front of them. She couldn't afford to lose her job. She needed these tips to pay her brother's medical bills. She forced herself to breathe. "I'll get your drinks," she said softly. Brandon clapped his hands loudly. "Wow, she talks. Maybe next time she'll do a backflip." His friends roared with laughter again. Steven put his newspaper down. The diner grew tense without anyone acknowledging it. A few customers recognized him but stayed quiet, expecting something. Steven watched Lily's shoulders slump as she hurried toward the counter, trying not to break. Brandon leaned back in the booth, bragging loudly. "People like her are losers. They serve us because they failed at life." Steven exhaled, folding the paper carefully. He didn't rush. He didn't storm. He simply observed, calm yet sharp. Meanwhile, Lily reached the counter and tried to steady her shaking hands. Her colleague, a cook named Jared, saw her distress. "Hey, you okay?" "No, I'm just tired," she whispered. "He's worse than usual today. If you want, I can talk to the owner." "No, I can handle it." But she couldn't, not today. Brandon's words hit deeper because she was exhausted. Her brother's medical appointment had drained her emotionally that morning. Now she felt small, helpless. A teardrop hit the counter. Steven stood up. He moved slowly toward the booth where Brandon and his friends sat. Some customers straightened in their seats, others held their breaths. Brandon noticed the shadow approaching and looked up, annoyed. "What, you need something, old man?" Steven studied him with calm, steady eyes. "What you're doing to that young woman is not right." Brandon barked a laugh. "Who asked you? We're having fun. She works here. She's supposed to deal with customers." Steven didn't blink. "Bullying isn't fun." Brandon's friends exchanged uneasy glances. Something about Steven's presence felt heavier than they expected. Brandon forced confidence. "Look, Grandpa, I don't care what you think. You're not some superhero." Steven leaned slightly forward. "And you're not as tough as you pretend to be." A hush swept across the diner. Brandon stood up suddenly, trying to appear bigger than he was. "You want to say that again?" Steven didn't move. "Sit down." The two words weren't loud, but they hit Brandon like a command issued by someone used to being obeyed. But Brandon's ego didn't let him back down. "Nah, I'm not sitting. You think you can talk to me like that? I can do what I want." Steven's expression didn't change. "No, you can't, not when it hurts others." Brandon shoved the table, trying to appear intimidating. "Mind your own business." Steven glanced toward Lily. She was frozen, watching, her eyes wide with fear. "My business," Steven said quietly, "is protecting people who don't deserve cruelty." Brandon puffed his chest. "Or what, huh? You gonna fight me?" Steven tilted his head thoughtfully. "I don't need to fight you." "Yeah, why not?" Brandon mocked. Steven took one slow step forward, and the boy's confidence cracked. "Because you're already losing," Steven said. "Not to me, to yourself." Brandon's jaw tightened. The diner murmured. Then, feeling the weight of eyes on him, Brandon snarled, "Who even are you?" A man at another table whispered, "That's Steven Seagal." Brandon froze. For a moment his smirk vanished. His eyes widened slightly. Even his friends shrank back, whispering to each other. But the teen, stubborn and drowning in pride, tried to salvage his ego. "I don't care who you are. You can't tell me what to do." Steven stayed calm. "You're hurting a girl who did nothing to you. You think that makes you strong." Brandon swallowed. "Shut up. Strong men don't humiliate, they protect." Brandon's breathing turned shaky. "You don't want to keep going," Steven said softly. "Sit down, apologize." The diner was silent. Brandon hesitated. And then he made the worst decision of his life. He swung his arm, aiming to shove Steven in the chest. Steven caught his wrist effortlessly. Brandon froze in shock. Steven's grip was firm yet controlled. "Don't choose the wrong lesson," Steven whispered. Brandon tried to pull free but couldn't move. Steven released him gently, almost respectfully. Brandon stumbled backward into the booth, humiliated. His friends were pale. Customers stared in awe. Steven turned toward Lily. "You don't deserve this. You're doing your best. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Lily's eyes filled with tears. Grateful ones this time. Steven looked back at Brandon one last time. "You still have a chance to be better. Take it." He walked away, headed back to his table. But Brandon wasn't finished. Not yet, not by a long shot. And what he did next would change the entire diner forever. The diner went silent as Steven sat back down, calmly returning to his cooled breakfast as if nothing had happened. But inside Brandon, a storm of humiliation brewed. His pride burned hotter than his fear. His friends whispered frantically, clearly shaken, but Brandon's ego refused to let it end like that. He slammed his fist on the table, making cups rattle. "No way. I'm not letting some old guy embarrass me in front of everyone." His friend Trevor leaned forward, whispering urgently, "Dude, stop. That's Steven Seagal. Do you want to get folded like a chair?" But humiliation has a way of making a foolish boy do stupid things. Brandon pushed his friend's hand away. "I don't care. He made me look weak." Trevor exhaled. "Bro, you are weak." That only fueled Brandon more. He stood up, shaking with anger, and marched toward Steven's table with fists clenched. Customers gasped. Lily froze behind the counter, terrified of what would happen next. She started to move forward as if to intervene, but Jared quickly pulled her back. "Don't get close," Jared murmured. "He's not going to touch Seagal, and if he does, well, that's between him and gravity." Lily's heart pounded as she watched Brandon stomp toward the quiet martial artist. Steven didn't look up. He calmly lifted a forkful of eggs, took a slow bite, and placed the fork down gently. His calmness terrified Brandon more than any threat could. Brandon pointed a shaking finger at him. "You think you're some kind of hero. You think you can talk down to me." Steven finally looked up, eyes calm, almost disappointed. "I told you to sit down. You made me look stupid." Steven shrugged slightly. "No, your behavior did." Brandon's face turned red. His breathing grew fast. His fists tightened. "You think you're better than me," he snapped. Steven didn't blink. "I think you're better than the way you're acting." That simple sentence cracked something inside the teenager. He didn't want truth. He wanted dominance. He wanted to win. He wanted the room to respect him again. Brandon lunged. The room gasped. A cup fell off a table in the corner. Lily screamed, but all anyone saw was a blur. Steven rose from his seat, not rushed, not panicked, just fluid, and sidestepped in one smooth movement. Brandon's momentum carried him forward. Steven guided his wrist with effortless precision, turning Brandon around as though he were made of paper. In less than a second, Brandon was pressed face down on the diner floor, arm pinned behind his back, not painfully, but firmly enough that he couldn't move. It happened so fast that even his friends didn't register the moment until it was over. Steven spoke softly, not raising his voice even a little. "You're angry. I understand, but anger is a poor teacher." Brandon struggled helplessly. "Let me go." Steven applied the slightest pressure. The teen froze instantly. "You don't want me to let you go like this," Steven warned gently. "You'll just make another mistake." Customers stared in awe. Phones were out, but many were too stunned to even record. Lily covered her mouth, eyes wide. Steven eased the boy up to a kneeling position, releasing him slowly so he wouldn't fall. Then he stepped back, giving him space to breathe. It was a gesture of respect, something Brandon wasn't used to. The teen sat there, chest heaving, face burning with a mix of fear, shame, and confusion. No one said a word. Steven returned to his seat again, as calmly as before, like he was resuming a conversation with his breakfast. Brandon's friends didn't laugh. They didn't even move. Trevor whispered, "Dude, he didn't even hurt you. That's scarier than if he had." Brandon's mouth trembled. Something in him finally cracked, not pride this time, but realization. He looked around and saw the disappointment in everyone's eyes. Not fear, not respect, just disappointment. Slowly, shakily, he stood up. He walked over to Steven's booth again, but this time his shoulders weren't puffed. His hands weren't fists. His eyes weren't burning with anger. They were filled with something unfamiliar, humility. The entire diner watched. Brandon swallowed hard. I'm sorry." Steven looked up, studying him for a long moment. Brandon's voice trembled. "I shouldn't have talked to you like that, and I shouldn't have treated her like that." He glanced at Lily apologetically. She was surprised. She wasn't expecting that. No one was. Steven nodded slowly. "Good." Brandon wiped his face with the back of his sleeve. "I don't know why I act like that sometimes. You're young," Steven said, "but youth is not an excuse. You can choose who you want to be. That choice starts now." Brandon nodded, throat tight. Steven continued, "What you did today, this is the kind of thing you carry for years. But apologizing, that's the first step in becoming a man who doesn't have to bully anyone to feel important." Brandon's eyes watered, but he didn't look away. "I don't want to be like this. I just wanted people to respect me." Steven leaned forward slightly. "Respect is earned by how you treat those who can't fight back." The words landed like a weight on Brandon's chest. Lily approached cautiously, unsure if she should interrupt. Steven gestured kindly toward her. "Say it to her." Brandon turned to Lily. His voice cracked. "I'm really sorry. I was just being stupid. You didn't deserve anything I said." Lily softened. "Thank you, that means something." Brandon nodded stiffly. Trevor finally got up, walked over, and placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. "Man, let's just go." But Brandon shook his head. "No, I want to stay." Trevor blinked. "Stay after all that?" Brandon looked down, embarrassed. "I want to fix it." He walked back to the booth, picked up the menus, straightened the table, and then quietly said to Lily, "Can we order now? And I'll be polite." The diner murmured in surprise. Lily smiled gently. Of course. She took their order. The boys behaved. They thanked her, they didn't mock her, they didn't break anything, they didn't laugh at her. It was like someone flipped a switch inside Brandon. Steven watched from his booth not as a hero or a judge, but as someone who had seen too many young men ruin their lives by mistaking cruelty for strength. After a few minutes, Lily placed Steven's check on the table. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. Steven smiled softly. Sometimes a small moment can change a whole life. Lily nodded. "It did, for me too." He placed a generous tip on the table. More than generous, enough to help her and her brother for at least a week. She stared at it, shocked. "Sir, this is too much." Steven shook his head. "No, it's just right." Then he stood, put on his jacket, and walked toward the exit. As he reached the door, he heard footsteps behind him. It was Brandon. "Sir," the boy called. Steven paused. Brandon approached, nervous but sincere. "Thank you for not hurting me, and for telling me the truth." Steven rested a hand briefly on his shoulder. "Be someone worth respecting." Brandon nodded, eyes glistening. Steven stepped outside into the soft rain. Inside the diner, something had changed. A bully had been humbled, a waitress had been uplifted, and everyone had witnessed respect win over arrogance without a single unnecessary punch. And that is how the entire diner changed, because one man stood up, not with violence, but with wisdom.